The views and opinions expressed on My Story Living with Lupus podcast represents each person's individual experience. By listening to this podcast or reading our blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others. As always, consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. My Story Living with Lupus podcast is officially trademarked, all rights reserved. Thank you for joining me for another episode of My Story Living with Lupus podcast. I'm your host, Susan Hendricks, and I'm so glad that you could join me on this Thursday, August 19th, 2021. At the age of 22, our guest had 5 strokes. She found herself fighting for her life. Paralyzed on the left side, she received a life-changing diagnosis. Up next, Heather Rendulic is here to tell her story of living with Cavernous Angioma. So, you know what I want you to do, all the way from the United States to Ecuador. Get ready to grab your cup of coffee, your cup of tea, and to my listeners late at night, now you know I appreciate you. So get ready to grab your favorite glass of wine and come on and join the conversation right here on My Story Living with Lupus podcast. At the age of 22, our next guest experienced 5 strokes and was diagnosed with Cavernous Angioma. Her faith, along with her will to fight, remained strong. I'm so happy to welcome Heather Rendulic to tell her story on My Story Living with Lupus podcast. Thank you so much, Heather.
Oh, thank you for having me, Susan.
Heather, tell the audience, our listening audience, a little bit about yourself.
Oh, great. So I'm currently 31 years old. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Most of my 9-to-5 job, I work in human resources for a nonprofit. I've been born and raised in the Pittsburgh area, and like you just so mentioned in my introduction, when I was in my early 20s and in college, I had a stroke randomly and was diagnosed with some pretty rare brain condition called Cavernous Angioma. And this condition is basically a tumor made up of blood vessels is kind of the easiest way to describe it. And it's really weak blood vessels that can rupture or leak blood into the brain or spinal cord. And mine was in my brain, and it was leaking blood into my brain. The only known cure for this condition is brain surgery to remove the lesion. However, mine was so deep in my brain, the doctors considered it inoperable and told me that there's no treatment for it right now. They are trying to research treatments for this condition, but at my time of diagnosis, There was no treatment, and to just kind of live my life as best I could and hope it didn't bleed again. But as you also mentioned, it did bleed again. It bled 4 more times in the next 11 months. The 5th and final one caused a massive stroke. Actually happened in my sleep. And I woke up and I was completely paralyzed on the left side of my body. At that point, they did do the brain surgery because how aggressive my lesion was. They were afraid it was going to kill me. So I had a 9-hour craniotomy, and then I woke up and started one of the toughest battles of my life, which was relearning how to walk and, live my life as a stroke victim at a very young age. And I did just that. I set out and I did it, and I'm here today, almost 9 years later, and I, graduated from college with honors. I started a career in human resources. I actually just published my first book about my journey, and I'm starting a motivational speaking career as well as a coaching business to help other people going through hard times.
Heather, let me ask you this. Out of everything you have gone through, at the early age of 22, how did your parents have the strength to deal with everything that was going on with their child?
So what's really interesting is my parents actually helped me write the book. It's called Headstrong Through Life, Love, and Brain Surgery. And they write a couple paragraphs at the end of each chapter giving their perspective. Now, they are an incredibly strong people, and I had an amazing support system. But they talk about how hard it was watching a child go through that. But I do have to give all the credit to our faith in God. He got us through some of the darkest moments. And, we had hope that he was in control, but it wasn't easy. So they are very strong, and they talk about it in more depth in the book.
Now, with a massive stroke and the being paralyzed, how long did it take you to learn how to walk again, and in some cases, talk again?
Yes, so my speech was affected slightly. I had a little bit of slurred speech, but my main thing was I was completely paralyzed. I was in a wheelchair. It did take me almost a year to walk again unassisted. So I slowly started, I was in an inpatient rehabilitation center for a while, and we started, just trying to move certain muscles again and have the brain try and rewire itself. And I, then slowly graduated to walking with a cane and then an orthotic, like a brace that helped. And then I even had a couple surgeries after to help me walk even better because some of my tendons in my foot and my leg had gotten so short from being incapacitated that, I had to have a tendon lengthening procedure done that helped me walk better. But, and I still, I'm walking today. I have a bit of a limp, that some people notice. But I don't care. I'm just so happy that I'm walking. So.
Now, your condition, did they state that it was from birth, or they just didn't know while all of a sudden?
So they believe Cavernous Angioma. They believe that you're born with it. It happens while you're developing in the womb. It's a genetic mutation. I did have my lesion genetically tested after it was removed during the brain surgery because there are 2 types of this disease. One is the sporadic, meaning it just is bad luck, I guess, or just random. And then there's a genetic form of it, which would mean that, I could potentially pass this on to my children. But we had no prior family history of it, so I didn't suspect that, but I wanted to be sure. And the genetic test did show that mine was the sporadic kind, meaning that I just had a genetic mutation. It was just kind of, they said it's like lightning striking twice in one place. So it was kind of just a freak thing that happened while I was in the womb. Growing up, I never had any headaches or migraines or anything. I had no idea that I had this until I was, 22, and it bled, and, that's when it made its entrance, I guess.
So you started having your signs and symptoms at the age of 22.
Yes, I remember like it was yesterday, the first bleed. I ended up getting some like pins and needles, like tingling sensation on my left side, and I had a little bit of a vision change, like double vision, and I just felt like something was wrong. Like, I think our bodies tell us when something's off, and I just had this feeling that something was wrong, and I went to the emergency room. They did a CT scan and saw that I had some blood in my brain, and that's when they freaked out because I'm so young and what's causing this, and then they ran a whole bunch of other tests, and that's how they found the cavernous angioma.
Wow. Most people that have had 5 aneurysms are not here to tell their story, and I commend you. They say, this is the best way I can put it, they say God will turn your test into your testimony, and this is your testimony. You never gave up on your faith. And I think that's one thing with anyone who goes through a chronic illness. You have to have a strong faith, knowing that you're going to make it out of that situation.
And when I, in between, during that 11-month period, and I talk about this in the book, I struggled with my faith because I'm human, and I felt like he wasn't answering my prayers, and I like to tell this story, especially for people going through hard times. But we were praying after my initial brain hemorrhage and diagnosis. We were praying, no more bleeding, because that's like what we thought would be the best thing. We don't want it to bleed anymore, and it kept happening, like once every couple months I was in the hospital again with another brain hemorrhage, and, I was feeling so hopeless, and I was mad at God because I said, like, why is he not listening? Like, does he not care about me? Like, why isn't he answering my prayers? Well, it turns out after my brain surgery to remove the lesion, my neurosurgeon came into my ICU room, and my family was all around me, and we were talking about the procedure and how well it went. And he said that because of those 5 brain bleeds that I had, the lesion had moved to a little bit easier of a surface for him to reach in my brain to prevent permanent damage. So God, he had a better plan than I even knew to ask for. And it was such a blessing that he wasn't listening to me and my little prayers to asking for it to stop bleeding. He actually had something even better in mind to just get rid of the lesion, 100%, so I never have to worry about it for the rest of my life. And what a miracle. I mean, and like you said, a miracle that I'm here. I am cognitively able to work, and all that. Like, I am so blessed. And that's why I'm on a mission to share my message to help people, because I know that's why he kept me here.
One thing I know the listeners really want to know is, how did you take control of an uncontrollable situation, and what would you say to others?
So, bad things happen to everybody. Unfortunately, it's part of life. It's part of us living in this world, and we can't control what happens to us, but what we can control is how we react to those situations. So I decided to develop the mindset during my struggles with my health that I couldn't control what my brain was doing or if it was bleeding or not bleeding, but what I could control is my reaction to my situation. So was I going to let it, succumb me? Was I going to let it overwhelm me and I become bitter and, a recluse? I don't know. But I did not want to do that. I wanted to make the best of my situation because I didn't know what tomorrow held. But what I did know is what I could do today. So I would focus on eating healthy because that's something I could do to prevent other problems in my health. Exercise. I mean, it wasn't going to help my brain per se with this condition, but it would help me as the general well-being, and it helps your emotional state. And now, I'm still disabled. I still don't have use of my left hand. Like I said, I'm very blessed, and I'm not here to complain because I am so fortunate, but it is a struggle every day. I mean, you'd be surprised how many things you need two hands to do. But I choose each day to be thankful for how far I've come, where it could have led, that I'm here, I'm breathing. So those are the things we can control, is our reactions, our mindset, our perspective, and then how we use those situations to help others.
What are you doing now? Do you have a business?
Yes, so I started my business. It's called Faith Not Fear LLC. You can check out my website, which I had created for my book, but now has turned into my business page. But it's heatherheadstrong.com. And like I said, my book is called Headstrong Through Life, Love, and Brain Surgery. But I am doing motivational speaking. I'm doing it virtually and in person for churches, organizations. But I also just launched a coaching program, and it's called Becoming Headstrong with Heather. And this program we can do anywhere from a month to 3 months to 6 months to a year. And it includes one-on-one sessions with myself, and I help people overcome challenges in their life and give them tips and tools they can use that I've used over the years, and just helping them become more confident and more headstrong.
Well, could you give us just a little bit of the tips and tools that you have used over the years?
Yes, so I already talked about one of the main ones, which is your mindset, like I talked about just a minute ago, about how the control and uncontrollable situation and our reactions to things that happen to us, putting them into perspective and, thinking, okay, what can I do today? And I like to tell people about goals. So, like when I was paralyzed and in a wheelchair, my goal was to learn how to walk again. Now, nobody could tell me if that was ever going to happen for sure, but I had a goal to do it. So what I would do to keep myself motivated when we have a really big goal that might take a while is I would set smaller goals, like on a daily basis even, or a weekly basis of, in my situation, I said, okay, I'm going to, after physical therapy today, I'm going to do 3 laps with my cane around my first floor of my house, just because the more I do these exercises, the better it's going to help my brain to rewire itself so I can walk on my own. And I would do that, and then maybe the next week I would say, okay, I'm going to do 10 laps, and I would up it. But that also, then you stay motivated because you're making your goal more realistic. You're, breaking it into smaller, more achievable goals, and it gets you closer to the end goal. But I want the listeners to know that no matter what you're facing, no matter how big and scary and dark it is, that to just take it a day at a time. Sometimes I think we get too ahead of ourselves. And I don't know if anyone's like me who's a big planner, but I'm guilty of this. I start stressing or worrying about stuff that may or may not happen, 6 months or a year from now. And, we don't have control over those things. We need to focus on what can we do today to better ourselves and better the world we live in. And if you have a faith in God, rely on Him, cast all your troubles on Him, and just know that even when all we see is the cross, He sees the empty tomb. And to just have faith and just one day at a time, keep going. You've made it through 100% of your worst days.
Now, if someone is interested in receiving coaching, how would they get in contact with you?
My email is the best way to reach me, heather@heatherheadstrong.com. Or I'll even, if somebody wants to call or text me, 412-592-3086. I'm happy to help people in any way.
Could you repeat that number once again for our audience?
Yes, 412-592-3086.
All right, and you gave your website information also for them to register. Now, I'm sorry. Let me ask this question: is it free to register?
Yes, it's free. I have a weekly blog which you can subscribe to through my website. My weekly blogs do often contain a lot of tips I have to help people. You can read the blogs I've already posted on my website. That's all free. And then there is a contact form on my website too. If somebody wants to get in touch with me, that goes straight to my inbox. But my website again is heatherheadstrong.com.
Heather, I thank you so much for joining us today and telling your inspirational story.
Oh, well, thank you, Susan, for having me. It's a great opportunity and a blessing.
Hold on 1 minute, Heather.
Okay.
If you would like to appear on an episode of My Story Living with Lupus, you can contact us at mystorylivingwithlupus@gmail.com. Also visit us on our Instagram page and also our website, My Story Living with Lupus. Well, we all know what time it is for me. I would like to thank Heather Rendulic for such an amazing story of hope, courage, and the will to fight. But as usual, before I go, just to remind you that on August 30th, I will be having a biopsy performed to rule out cancer of the neck. Also, excuse my voice. And I want to leave you with this. Someday, everything will make perfect sense. So for now, laugh at the confusion, smile through the tears, and keep reminding yourself that everything happens for a reason.
But most importantly, remember that you can do all things through Christ, which strengthens you. I'm your host, Susan Hendricks, and I'll see you next time for another episode of my story, Living with Lupus podcast. Have a most blessed, positive, and safe weekend.